Support provided by Walters, Papillon, Thomas, Collins, LLC.
Thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Mike, and thank you to the Rotary of Baton Rouge. It's so good to see so many longtime friends and colleagues here in the room. I first was blessed to be invited to come here almost 8 years ago. I think I've been here 4 or 5 times. Saturday Night Live, I think, gives you a jacket or something when you show up 5 times, so I'll wait for that one. But I'm just very blessed to be back with friends talking about our kids. And I wanted to take my time first to talk a little bit about the 800,000 kids in Louisiana, what they've been up to, and how we've been trying to help them. I then want to talk about what I think is the most exciting, dynamic, and at a moment of opportunity school system in the state, which is the school system here in East Baton Rouge Parish. And then I want to have a brief dialogue, if we have time at the end, just to engage in questions. One of the things I like about this forum is that it's a big forum, but folks are so close and so tight, we can always talk as if we're in a small room. So I thank you so much. I should also note, by the way, that I'm joined by Sandy Holloway, who I know is a Rotarian in Thibodeau. But Sandy is also a Bessie member and has been elected from the Bayou Country for the last 4 years and recently won re-election, which the kids of Louisiana should be grateful for. So congratulations to you, Sandy. 8 years ago when I started, when I first came here, I think it's fair to say there was a lot of activity in Louisiana in education. And there was a lot of talk about vouchers and Common Core and teacher evaluation and all this stuff. And that had come on the heels of years of incredible work that had happened to try to reverse the fortunes of hundreds of thousands of disadvantaged Louisianans. And so I think it is important, anytime somebody from the government comes here and stands up and starts taking credit for stuff, to give credit where credit is due. And I'll talk about the teachers and the kids in a second. But really, everything that I'm going to talk about has roots in the work of Mike Foster, have roots in the work of Kathleen Blanco and Bobby Jindal, and all of the folks who worked with them and laid the groundwork, the Bessie boards and the legislatures of years past. I don't believe we'd be seeing progress had it not been for them. They laid the groundwork. And Katrina, whatever part of our state you were in, Katrina laid bare both the challenges and the possibility that we could accelerate that pace of change, especially for young people in Louisiana whose background or zip code or what have you had historically consigned them to struggling schools. And so when I showed up in 2012, it was a frenzied moment of activity, of political activity, a little chaos sometimes for those of you who spent time in the Capitol, but it was also a time of possibility. And now, 2 governors into that process, 8 years into that process, back here to talk about the plan, I think it's worth recounting. Has that worked? Has whatever was set in motion, whatever we tried to build on the shoulders of what those governors and Bessie boards and legislatures of past had done, has it worked? So I want to talk about that first, and then I want to talk about what's happening here in EBR. Well, what have we done? What have we done? Because with all respect to the elections and the politicians, and with all respect to the media, there are times when education politics supersedes the substance of education in our classrooms. And I know my friends who work in schools could say this. There's time when words like standards and tests and accountability ratings and letter grades, school choice, these things get trotted out. But in fact, our business is much simpler than that, and it's much less political than that. Our business is 800,000 young people and their 1 million parents who get up every day, and the first thing on their mind is, how can today be a great day for this child? Our business is 50,000 teachers, private school teachers, charter school teachers, traditional public school teachers, doesn't matter which. They all get up every day wondering, how can I be the best at my incredibly hard job and do right by these kids? And so none of it's about Common Core or vouchers or whatever you come down on those issues. It's about how do we get the experience for those 800,000 kids. Whatever the color of their skin, whatever zip code they live in, however much money mom and dad have in their wallet, how can we make that the best experience possible, a challenging experience? And so when you look out at the best education systems in the world, the best education systems in our country and the best in the world, I think they're doing 5 things. and we've tried to replicate it here. We've tried to take all that past governors and legislatures wanted us to do, and to try to boil it down into 5 simple things. And in the time since I first came here, these are the 5 things that we've done. They're the only 5 things that we've done. They're the essence of what states and schools should be doing together. First, when youngsters come into the world, and I can tell you I'm living this right now, I've got a 15-month-old little girl at home, our first. I'm living this right now. There should be a quality place, a safe place, a caring place, a loving and educational place where they spend their days. And for a lot of kids, that's going to be at home, which is great. But for a lot of our kids, both of their parents are working. Maybe their only parent is working. Maybe they don't have a parent. And so for those kids, there should be an option. There must be an option to allow mom and dad to go to work and to find a way to make the first years of their lives enriching daily experiences. And that is why I have, without any exceptions, backed the notion that our state has to make a commitment to a quality system of early childhood care and education. And I believe that a political consensus around this has finally been built, which is great. But it's never going to be in our state, and it really isn't going to be anywhere, where we just tax ourselves into creating 5 new years, birth 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, of a school system. And so we have to make the best use of what we have, which isn't just 5 new years of additional pre-K. It's also focusing on our child cares, our Head Starts, our private pre-Ks. And we're the only state in the country now that has brought all of those assets into one system, so that for any child care, any Head Start, any pre-K that receives any public money at all, we can tell you how well things are being done, how many parents are signing up for it. We can grow the ones that are working. We can intervene in the ones that are not. A unified system of early childhood care and education that's delivering on the promise of safety, health, and quality for every child. Priority number 1. Second, teaching in America under standardized testing, unfortunately for many kids, and I believe in those tests, for many teachers, is a daily exercise in trying to bring coherence to an otherwise chaotic situation. In too many schools, in too many districts, in too many states, the teacher is given standards by the state. This is what your kids must be able to do. Then they're given a curriculum that only covers some of those standards. Then they're measured on a test that doesn't have anything to do with what's in the curriculum. And then their school systems train them on a bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with any of those 3 things. And then the teacher's job and the principal's job is to make sense of it. In the best performing school systems in the world, teaching is a much simpler thing than that. The skills that kids are supposed to teach, are supposed to learn, are embodied in a curriculum. Everybody teaches that curriculum. Whatever training a teacher receives is training on how to use that curriculum. And the test at the end of the year measures exactly what's in that curriculum. Teaching in America, for too many teachers, is an exercise in guesswork and managing chaos for teachers. And it's why I'm proud to say that the second part of our plan has to fully bring in line the curriculum with the tests, with the support that teachers receive, so that every single teacher in our state can see a clear roadmap to success with no guesswork. But third, you have to be prepared to actually teach. If you are a lawyer, you were prepared over the summers through clinical work and summer associateships. If you are an architect, or a physician, or if you are a nurse, or if you are any other job that calls itself a profession, your most profound preparation came in the context of a real work setting. Any one of us who's ever done a job or had a career would tell you that. I didn't learn to be a policymaker or an educator in some ivory tower somewhere. I learned it from people who know how to do it. Why is it that teaching is an exception to that? And that your on-the-job experience before you become a teacher is only a 6-week internship? And then we wonder why teachers struggle in their first year and their second year. And then we wonder why all the rookie teachers get sent to the struggling schools, where they work with the lowest income, hardest to serve kids. It's a daily tragedy in our country. And that's why under Sandy's leadership and this Bessie board, we became the only state in the country that requires of its college seniors, if you're training to be a teacher, you go for a full year residency. Your 4th year of college goes from the first day of elementary school to the last day of elementary school. It goes from the first day of high school to high school graduation because you are, as a senior in college, full-time faculty on the school site under the mentorship of a veteran educator. It just makes sense. 4th, I don't know what the percentage in this room is. My guess is it's higher than 20%. But 20% of Louisianans have a 4-year university degree, which is relatively low, and it should be higher. But it's not going to be 40% anytime soon. It's sure not going to be 60% anytime soon. And it's never going to be 100%. So why do we have a K through 12 education system, and I, in many ways, think a higher education system, that is organized around the idea that everyone is headed toward a baccalaureate degree? Why is it that the available jobs in our state and in our country that are high paying, that are upwardly mobile, oftentimes require a college education of sorts, but not a full 4-year university diploma? And why is it that we have a moribund career and technical education system in America that is not equipping youngsters for the middle skill jobs that will give them stability, a leg up, and upward mobility? Jobs in healthcare, jobs in industrial contracting, jobs in auto tech, jobs across the middle skill spectrum. And it's why I'm proud to say through a program called Jumpstart, we've revitalized the career and technical education system. We've increased the number of youngsters getting industry credentials from 13,000 in 2012 to 65,000 last year. We have to have a career and technical education system that is allowing youngsters to know what it means to work, to validate their work skills, and to develop interest in a career. And finally, we have to remember that all of the things, and this segues into what I want to talk about next here in this page, all of the things I just described, a good curriculum, a good child care, like my kid has, a good teacher training experience and a well-prepared teacher, a great option like advanced placement, like these fine students from Baton Rouge High have engaged in, or a good career and technical program. All of these things, over our history, have been a heck of a lot easier for the wealthy among us to obtain than for the poor among us. We have hundreds of thousands of youngsters in Louisiana who come to school every day in schools that are not able to do or are not being given the opportunity to do many of those things. And they exist predominantly in neighborhoods where the income is low and where too often you have consolidated pockets of poverty. And we have to be relentless about changing that. It's those 5 things: a unified system of early childhood education, a teaching environment that makes sense to teachers, preparation in the classroom, not in the ivory tower, revitalizing the career and technical education system, and focusing on low-income youth. Those have been our 5 pillars. And I'm proud to say, and Cindy mentioned some of these things, I think you can say today, categorically, that Louisiana is a better educated state than it has ever been in the history of this state. The class of 2018, which is the class's graduation rate we most recently announced, graduated 5,000 more kids than graduated in the class of 2012. That's a 10% increase. But more interesting than that is what those kids did. 5,000 more of them actually took a college course or got a strong industry credential while they were in high school. 5,000 more in the class of 2018 than in 2012 went on to a community college or a university. And most impressive, 5,000 of them earned free tuition at that college and university, more in 2018 than in 2012 because they got TOPS. That is real value in the hands of Louisiana families and for the future of Louisiana, because successive governors, successive legislatures, and Bessie have invested in the education system and have tried to modernize the future of this state and its economy. Which brings me to its capital city. Today I announced the letter grades, the school performance scores, which is a bit of good news and sometimes some bad news for folks in local communities. Everybody wants to know what the grade of their school is. Is Baton Rouge High still an A? If it is, does it rank number 1, number 2, number 3? Where is it relative to Ben Franklin? Where is it relative to Caddo Magna? Everybody wants to know. But to me, the most interesting thing is not just who's at the top and the rankings, because everybody loves rankings, but it's who's getting better, who's growing. And a piece of great news is if you look at the districts that are growing, in particular the big districts, Orleans, Jefferson, Lafayette, Calcasieu, Caddo, EBR, the district that has a plan, and I wouldn't have said this 8 years ago, the district that has a plan and that's growing is East Baton Rouge Parish. And I don't say that because I'm just here. I want to give you some numbers that I announced recently earlier today. Congress requires that people in my position, my colleague Dana Peterson in the back, that people in my position name every year the list of struggling schools. There's 517 schools on that list. There's 219 of them that are in really tough shape. We've got 1,500 schools in Louisiana. 219 schools on this list. EBR had 23 of them last year. 23 of them. So about 10% of the schools on that list are here in this parish. In the time since we announced that list last year, 21 of those schools made progress as announced today. Superintendent Drake announced a zone, the Innovation Zone strategy, that he was going to concentrate most resources on. These are schools exclusively in North Baton Rouge. Of 14 schools, 12 made improvement on the list today. And I can trace that to what's happening in schools, and I'm so happy that my friend Ben Nikes is here from East Baton Rouge Parish. I compliment him and Superintendent Drake. I also compliment their colleague, Dr. Quintina Timol, for the work that she did with those 14 schools. Because what she said is, with students who have historically struggled, predominantly students of color, exclusively low-income students, we're going to insist on not just high expectations in name, but in deed. There is no district in this state that has greater attention to the implementation of challenging curriculum in struggling schools than East Baton Rouge Parish. Now, I don't think that would have happened without state intervention. I believe the state intervention that was launched in Louisiana, in East Baton Rouge Parish 10 years ago by my predecessor, Paul Pastorak, was important to getting people's attention. In the time since, the state has managed 8 schools in East Baton Rouge Parish. They're now entirely charter schools. But also in the time since, East Baton Rouge has begun to create charter schools, working with the great team at New Schools for Baton Rouge. And they have gotten serious about transforming the futures of their non-charter schools, their traditional district schools. And so now we're at an inflection point here in East Baton Rouge. And there are 3 decisions. I'm not going to talk about the pullout, but there are 3 decisions. Trust me, I'm not going to talk about the pullout. There are 3. Don't even try. There are 3 decisions that are in front of this district, irrespective of all that. I'm talking about the kids in North Baton Rouge now, not the kids in South Baton Rouge. And there are 3 important decisions that are coming up that I believe will determine the fate of tens and tens of thousands of kids in North Baton Rouge in the years hence. First, you all have a superintendent transition coming up. You cannot afford to let go of that opportunity. You have the chance to bring someone in or to elevate someone from within who takes the charge seriously, that Baton Rouge's kids are just as smart and they're just as capable as any kids in this state, as any kid in this country, and any kid on this earth, who is not going to take his or her foot off the gas when it comes to the plan for transformation, who's not going to care whether they call it a charter school or a traditional school, who just wants good schools, and who's going to do anything to make that happen. You have a chance to hire a good superintendent. Second, it's time for the local parish school board to step up and to take back these 8 schools from state control. Yes, these were the 8 most struggling schools in this parish. They're in a better place now. They're not perfect, but they're in a better place than they were when Superintendent Pastorak took those schools over 10 years ago under Bessie, and it's time for the local board to do that. But third, the taxpayers and the school board of this parish do need to reconcile that if they're going to do that, the school buildings that those kids come to school in need to be equalized with the quality of the school buildings in the rest of this parish. Other than Orleans in the wake of Katrina, no school system in the state has done more to build gleaming palaces to education for the purpose of educating young people than this parish has. When you drive down Government Street and you drive past the incredible high school that these young people go to, you are inspired by the potential of public education. Baton Rouge High is a beacon to the potential of young people, architecturally, engineering-wise, the daily experience there. I'd say the same about Lehigh. If you spent, even just drive by Lehigh, every kid in America should go to a school like that. But we do have schools that are falling apart in East Baton Rouge Parish. Glen Oaks Middle School is falling apart. Prescott Middle School is falling apart. Capitol High School is falling apart, and I could name more. Those kids are poor, they're entirely African American, and those schools have struggled. If EBR is going to bring those schools back, and I believe it should because I believe it's ready, because I believe EBR is on the right track, we as a parish need to make a commitment to equalizing the quality of school facilities. Nearly 60 years, more than 60 years after Brown versus Board of Education, it should not be that black children are attending schools that are falling apart while we have gleaming palaces on the other side of town. And this is no critique of anyone. I believe it was the right thing to rebuild Lehigh. It was certainly the right thing to revitalize Baton Rouge High. It was certainly the right thing to pass the commitment to bond out new facilities across the parish. It was the right thing. But next time you drive down Plank Road and you look at the schools that border either side of it, ask yourself, is it reasonable that these buildings built in the 1960s and never renovated since still stand in the condition that they are? Or must we reconcile with this fact and do right by those kids? And I believe that is the answer. If EBR wants its schools back from the state, wants to make itself whole and claim that it is a renovated school system, then we must get on that track and make a commitment to making those buildings right. Friends, the education system in Louisiana is on the right direction because of leadership like you have here in Baton Rouge. Last week, my final point I'll make, the National Assessment of Education Progress came out. This is called the Nation's Report Card, administered by the federal government every 2 years. The #1 state in the nation in improvement in 8th grade math was the state of Louisiana. The #2 state in the nation in improvement in 8th grade reading was the state of Louisiana. Louisiana's kids are just as smart, they're just as capable as any children in America. God gave our kids gifts no lesser than he gave to any child on this earth, and they deserve a world-class education with world-class curriculum, world-class teachers, and world-class buildings. It is within our purview to make that happen. And I thank you so much for inviting me back to talk about it.
Superintendent White. First of all, congratulations on the NAEP scores. And in particular, you didn't mention how well our African American students did nationally on those NAEP scores, which I think is outstanding. I thought you might want to mention the new pilot for 5th year high school to this club and let us know a little bit about it.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara, and congratulations on all your successes too, and thank you for your lifelong support of education. We have a new program out that Barbara's mentioning that effectively says for kids who aren't earning tops, there right now really isn't a system that takes them from high school to a good first job. And you know, we're graduating more kids than ever before, but when you look at youth employment numbers, they're not budging. We've got a lot of kids walking around with high school diplomas but dropping out of life. And so we've started a new pilot where local high schools, local community colleges, and local employers can create a fully funded 5th year of high school if it is leading to a good first job. This is an apprentice-based, industry credential-based year where the student can stay affiliated with the high school and connect to a good first job in healthcare, in construction, in auto, and so on. So if interested at all, louisianabelieves.com, and thank you for mentioning it. Yes, please.
So I was trained as a teacher in a different state. So a quick question. The schools that are listed today that have the grades, does that include all schools that have taxpayers' monies going to them? Will that be 100% list?
Yes. We're the only state in the country that has the same rating system for non-public schools that take public funds as for public schools.
And so then that's based on the same standard, the same that all children have to have the same tests?
Yes.
And all,
Yes. Yes. And I can't emphasize this enough that, you know, the national dialogue around our industry is, you know, Betsy DeVos is for private schools, the unions are for public schools. I just think that is such baloney. I mean, what parent has ever thought that way? Zero is the answer. The answer is, from my perspective, let the parents choose but have a standard that determines what works and what doesn't. If schools don't work, then they lose the privilege to educate our kids. If they do, great, more kids should go there. I don't care whether it's a Catholic school or a traditional public school or a charter public school. Are they educating our kids?
Yes, sir. A little bit off topic, but you did say that zip code can oftentimes define the future for the student and the education that's provided. For students that are going off to college and come from one of these disadvantaged schools, are there things like the proposed SAT environmental impact score, other things that help those sort of people get the same opportunities that folks from well-recognized schools already have?
Yeah, I mean, I think the good news is here in Baton Rouge, there's an organization that 5 or 10 years ago could have told America what America has learning about college, which is the Baton Rouge Youth Coalition. And BRIC knew that kids who were leaving their high schools, if they were from historically disadvantaged backgrounds, were going to have a real hard time of it, whether they went to LSU or whether they went to Yale or whether they went to University of California, Santa Barbara, wherever they went. It was going to be harder. It's harder to get home over Thanksgiving when you have no money. It's harder to eat when everybody else is home for Thanksgiving and the cafeteria is closed. BRIC was addressing those issues a decade ago. And I think now we're just beginning to learn that these are realities. So I credit the leadership at LSU and the leadership at Southern and elsewhere for kind of understanding this stuff and trying to create a bunch of programming that's supportive of historically disadvantaged kids on those campuses.
You had mentioned accountability scores, and with the innovation that we've seen in education, we're starting to see schools that cater specifically 100% to children who have disabilities or exceptionalities. How are those schools' performance scores being evaluated, whether they're charters or whether they're private?
Well, if there is a school like that, for example, I don't know that I would necessarily categorize it as a disability, but for students who have reading disabilities or dyslexia, for example, there's a wonderful school that I'm sure many of you have been to that Laura Cassidy founded here in Baton Rouge. And we evaluate that school under the federal law in the same way that the other schools are evaluated, but under the state laws, we have an alternate system. You know, we recognize that's a very different environment. And Emerge is another school that's just doing incredible things, and I know many of you are familiar with. So it's important that we let those innovations grow and flourish, and at the same time, under the law that Congress very rightly passed, students with disabilities are held to the same standards as everybody else. That's a tough line to walk, but I think we're trying to strike that balance.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thank you.
Support provided by Walters, Papillon, Thomas Collins, LLC.